In 1978, a retired schoolteacher in rural Tennessee fed herself for 11 days on $3.40. Not because she was trying to prove something, because that was what the check allowed after the electric bill. The meals she made during those 11 days were not sad. They were not desperate. They were precise. Number 7 on this list costs less than 60 cents today and kept more American seniors alive through lean decades than any government nutrition program ever designed. Number 2 will make you question everything you think you know about what a meal is supposed to be. Hi, my name is Joseph, and this is Forgotten Old American. These are not recipes from food blogs or celebrity kitchens. These are the real meals, the ones made at kitchen tables that had seen better days, by hands that had worked harder than most of us will ever understand. 3 ingredients, sometimes less, always enough. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 25 cheap 3-ingredient meals American seniors made when times were tight. Number 25. Fried potatoes and onions. 2 potatoes, 1 onion. Bacon grease saved in a coffee can on the back of the stove. That was the whole list. You sliced the potatoes thin, diced the onion, dropped everything into a cast iron skillet with a spoonful of that grease, and let it all cook low and slow until the edges went golden and the onions turned sweet and soft. The smell alone was enough to make a quiet house feel lived in. For seniors across Appalachia and the rural South, this was not a side dish. This was Tuesday night supper, and it asked almost nothing of a body that was tired from a long day of being old and managing alone. Number 24. Cornmeal mush with butter. Cornmeal, water, butter. 3 ingredients that the Depression generation understood the way later generations understood fast food, instinctively and without thinking. You boiled water, stirred in the cornmeal slowly so it did not lump, and cooked it until it thickened into a warm, golden porridge. A pat of butter melted across the top. That was breakfast. That was sometimes supper. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost less than $1 in 1980, and it lasted weeks. Seniors who had grown up eating this during the Depression never stopped making it. They did not call it nostalgic. They called it breakfast. Number 23. Canned tomatoes and white rice. 1 can of whole peeled tomatoes. 1 cup of white rice. Salt. You crush the tomatoes with your hand directly into the pot, the way grandmothers always did. You added the rice, added just enough water, and let the whole thing simmer covered until the rice absorbed every bit of that tomato liquid and turned a pale, beautiful pink. The result was savory and slightly sweet, and so filling that a single pot fed 1 person for 3 days. Italian immigrants brought the spirit of this dish to American cities in the early 1900s, and it spread quietly into every community that understood what it meant to make something from almost nothing. Number 22. Peanut butter and banana toast. Peanut butter, a banana, and 2 slices of bread toasted under the oven broiler, because not everyone had a toaster. This was the meal seniors made when they needed protein and energy and did not have the strength to stand over a stove. The banana sliced thin across the peanut butter, the warmth of the toast softening everything together. Nutritionists now point out that the combination of complex carbohydrates and healthy fats makes ideal fuel for aging bodies. The senior in 1976, who made this for lunch, did not know any of that. She just knew it held her until supper. Number 21. Saltines and canned sardines. A sleeve of saltines. 1 tin of sardines in oil. Nothing else required, though a splash of hot sauce never hurt anybody. You laid the sardines across the crackers 1 at a time and ate them standing at the kitchen counter. That is honestly the correct way to eat them. If anyone tells you otherwise, they have never been truly hungry. Sardines were 12 cents a tin in 1972. The calcium in the soft bones was better for aging joints than most supplements sold at the pharmacy. Seniors who ate this 3 times a week were accidentally doing something that modern sports nutritionists now recommend, with great seriousness and much larger price tags. Here is what nobody in the food industry wants to say out loud. The 3-ingredient meal is not a poverty meal. It is an efficiency meal. Every recipe on this list was built the way a good engineer builds a bridge. No extra parts, no wasted material, only what is necessary, and nothing else. The seniors who cooked this way were not failing at cooking. They were succeeding at a harder problem. How do you feed yourself well, alone, on a fixed income, with limited energy, limited storage, and a body that may not cooperate the way it used to? The answer was not a complicated recipe. The answer was a short list of ingredients that punched above their weight every single time. When you strip a meal down to 3 ingredients, you find out very quickly which 3 things actually matter. These seniors had already done that work, decades of it, and what they were left with was not poverty. It was precision. Number 20, egg and potato hash. 2 potatoes, diced small. 2 eggs. Butter. That was the whole list, and if you are already skeptical, you have never been genuinely hungry on a Friday morning with 3 days left until the check arrived. You fried the potatoes in butter in a cast iron pan, low, and slow, until the edges went golden and crisp, and the kitchen smelled like something worth waking up for. Then you cracked the eggs directly over the top, dropped the lid on for 2 minutes until the whites set but the yolks stayed soft, and you ate it straight from the skillet. Because washing an extra plate at 74 years old with arthritic hands is not laziness, it is mathematics. This was the meal that appeared on Friday mornings when the weekly grocery money had been spent down carefully to almost nothing. Eggs kept, potatoes kept, butter kept. Nothing in that pan ever went bad before you needed it. Together they made something that felt like a real breakfast, tasted like someone had put in genuine effort, and cost maybe 30 cents at 1980 prices. The skillet did all the work. You just had to show up. Sometimes that is the whole recipe. Number 19, stewed prunes over oatmeal. Rolled oats, dried prunes. A spoonful of brown sugar if you were feeling generous with yourself. The prunes simmered in a little water while the oatmeal cooked, then were spooned directly over the top. Warm, sweet, and deeply filling, in a way that sat with you until noon. Seniors who made this were not thinking about their digestive health, though the fiber content was extraordinary. They were thinking about warmth and sweetness and getting through a cold morning on a small budget. A canister of rolled oats cost 60 cents in 1979 and lasted 2 weeks of breakfasts. The prunes added iron and potassium that kept people going longer than they had any right to. Number 18, navy beans and ham broth. Dried navy beans, a leftover ham bone, or a single smoked ham hock. Water and salt. You soak the beans overnight, dropped the bone into the pot the next morning, covered everything with water, and walked away. 4 hours later, you had a thick, creamy, smoky pot of beans that tasted like Sunday dinner and cost less than $1. The ham bone was free, already paid for when you bought the ham. Seniors who understood economy had been practicing it their whole lives. Nothing left the kitchen wasted. The bone that sat in the refrigerator on Monday was supper by Wednesday, and it was better than what it came from. Number 17, milk toast, white bread. Warm whole milk. Butter. You toasted the bread, buttered it while still hot, tore it into rough pieces in a deep bowl, and poured warm milk over the top. That was it. If you had sugar, you added sugar. If you were sick, you added nothing. Because warm milk and soft bread was already everything a sick body needed. This was the meal that American grandmothers made for children who could not sleep, and for themselves on nights when the kitchen felt too empty to do anything ambitious. It required almost no standing. It required almost no money. It was warm and soft and asked nothing of teeth that might not be fully cooperating. Number 16. Fried cornbread and syrup. Cornmeal, water, salt, patted into flat cakes and fried in a dry skillet until each side went golden and slightly crisp. Poured over with sorghum syrup, or dark caro syrup, or whatever sweet thing was in the cabinet. This was the meal that crossed every regional and racial line in American poverty cooking, because cornmeal and water were available to nearly everyone. Seniors in Alabama and seniors in rural Ohio both made this, and neither one thought they had invented it. They had inherited it. That inheritance went back further than the Depression. It went back further than anyone on this list could personally remember, and it still tasted exactly right. Number 15. Rice and canned cream of mushroom soup. 1 cup of white rice. 1 can of cream of mushroom soup. 1 can of water. Everything into one pot, covered. Simmered for 20 minutes until the rice absorbed the soup and turned thick and savory and impossibly creamy without a single drop of actual cream. In the 1970s and 1980s, cream of mushroom soup was the secret engine of American home cooking for seniors who needed maximum result from minimum effort. One can cost 39 cents. One pot fed one person for 2 days. Campbell's Company never knew it was funding the retirement diet of half the Midwest, but it was. Here is what happened to these meals. They did not disappear because people stopped being poor. They disappeared because being poor became something to hide. By the 1980s, the snack food industry had spent 2 decades teaching Americans that real food came in a package with a brand name on it. Frozen dinners promised convenience. Processed soups promised quality. The message underneath all of it was the same. Cooking from scratch with cheap ingredients was something your grandmother did because she did not know better. She knew better. She knew that a can of beans and a ham bone made a meal that no frozen dinner could touch. She knew that 3 ingredients chosen correctly fed a person more completely than a boxed product with 40 ingredients and a nutrition label that required a chemistry degree to interpret. The seniors who kept making these meals were not behind the times. They were ahead of a food industry that had not yet been caught. Number 14. Tomato soup and crackers. 1 can of condensed tomato soup, milk instead of water, and a sleeve of saltines. You heated it the way the can suggested, but most people actually used milk. That made it creamier and richer and worth the extra few cents. You crumbled the saltines in as you went. The crackers thickened the soup, gave it texture, and made a bowl of 10-cent soup feel like a complete meal rather than a cup of colored water. On cold nights in small apartments where the heat was turned down to save money, this was the meal that cost almost nothing and delivered warmth that started in the stomach and spread outward, which is exactly where warmth needs to start. Number 13. Fried apples and biscuits. Sliced apples. Butter. Brown sugar. 3 ingredients that individually sit in every kitchen without much ambition, but together in a hot skillet become something that has absolutely no right to taste as good as it does. You melted the butter over medium heat, laid the apple slices flat, and scattered the brown sugar over the top. Then, you waited. That is the part nobody tells you. You have to wait and let the sugar dissolve into the butter and the apples release their juice, and the whole thing slowly becomes a dark bubbling caramel that coats every slice and fills the kitchen with a smell that is, and I mean this seriously, one of the finest smells a human being can experience without spending any money whatsoever. You spooned it over hot biscuits if you had them. You ate it straight from the pan with a fork if you did not. Either way was correct. Seniors who grew up in the rural South and Midwest made this from pure muscle memory, no recipe card required. It was the dessert when there was no dessert budget, and the meal when apples were cheap and everything else was not. It smells like being taken care of. That is not a small thing. Number 12. Oatmeal with bacon drippings and salt. This one stops people. Rolled oats, bacon drippings, salt. Not sweet oatmeal. Savory oatmeal is something that most people under 60 have never considered. And most people over 80 never stopped eating. You cooked the oatmeal in water, stirred in a spoonful of saved bacon drippings, added salt, and ate it the way you would eat grits, savory and warm, and deeply satisfying in a way that sugar and milk never quite achieved for a person who needed something substantial before a hard day. Food historians are only now documenting how widespread savory oatmeal was in working-class American households before the cereal companies successfully convinced everyone that oats were a sweet breakfast food. They were wrong. Your grandmother was right. Number 11. Pinto beans and cornbread. Dried pinto beans. Salt pork or a ham hock. Cornbread made from cornmeal, water, and salt, cooked in a cast iron skillet. Technically, this edges toward more than 3 ingredients depending on how strictly you count the cornbread. Seniors who made this would say cornbread is one thing, beans are another, and the ham hock is the third. They were correct, and you would not argue with them. This was the meal of the rural South for 100 years. It was the meal that said we have almost nothing, and we are eating like kings tonight. A bag of dried pintos cost 69 cents in 1982, and it fed one person for a week. Dignity on a budget so small it barely registered. Here is the thing about 3-ingredient cooking that the cooking shows will never tell you, because it makes their whole format irrelevant. Complexity does not equal nourishment. A meal with 40 ingredients is not 40 times better than a meal with 3. In most cases, it is not even twice as good. The seniors who cooked from these short lists were not limited. They were focused. They knew which ingredients mattered, and they used them correctly every single time, because they had been making the same things for 50 years and they had gotten very, very good at it. A woman who has made pinto beans and cornbread every week for 40 years makes them better than any trained chef who has made them twice for a dinner party. That is not sentiment. That is just how skill works. These meals are not interesting because they are old. They are interesting because they are right. Number 10. Bread and butter with sugar and cinnamon. White bread, butter, sugar and cinnamon mixed together, counted as one ingredient because it lived in a single bowl on the counter in houses that made this regularly. You buttered the bread, spread the cinnamon sugar thick, and slid it under the broiler for 90 seconds until the sugar caramelized into a thin, crackling crust that shattered when you bit into it. 4 cents in a 1974. Less than that if you already had everything in the house, which most people did, because everyone had bread and butter and sugar and cinnamon. This was the snack that became the meal when the meal was not available, and the treat that became the memory that lasted longer than any expensive dessert ever could. Number 9. Creamed dried beef on toast. A small jar of dried beef. Butter, flour and milk combined into a simple white sauce, which again counts as one thing because the sauce is the sauce. You melted the butter, whisked in the flour, poured in the milk, stirred until thick, and added the dried beef torn into rough pieces. You poured it over toast. The military called it something unprintable. Seniors who had lived through the war years and come out the other side called it supper and meant it without irony. The dried beef was cheap because it was preserved and salty, and a little went a long way. A jar cost 40 cents in 1975 and fed a person for 2 meals. It required 6 minutes and 1 pot and produced something that genuinely tasted like comfort. Number 8. Sweet potato and butter. 1 sweet potato. Butter. Brown sugar or honey. You bake the sweet potato in the oven wrapped in foil, until the flesh turned soft and sweet and almost liquid inside the skin. You split it open, dropped in a generous pat of butter, added a spoonful of brown sugar or a drizzle of honey, and ate it from the skin with a spoon. This was the complete meal that did not look like a complete meal but functioned as one. The sweet potato provided complex carbohydrates, beta-carotene, potassium, and fiber in proportions that nutritional scientists now discuss with genuine admiration. Seniors eating sweet potatoes 3 times a week in 1978 were eating better than people spending 5 times as much on vitamins at the health food store. Number 7. Fried salt pork with white beans. Salt pork sliced thin. Dried white beans soaked overnight. Water. You fried the salt pork until crisp and the fat rendered out into the pan. Then you added the soaked beans and enough water to cover and let everything simmer together for 2 hours until the beans turned creamy and the broth went thick and smoky and tasted like a meal that had taken all day, even though you had been sitting down for most of it. This was the meal that seniors across the rural South and Midwest made on the first day of the month and ate through the 5th. Cheap enough to matter, filling enough to hold you, and the kind of thing that tasted better every time you reheated it, which in a one-person household meant 4 or 5 times. Each one better than the last. Here is something that modern medicine is quietly confirming 50 years after these meals disappeared from most American tables. The ingredients that showed up over and over in 3-ingredient senior cooking were beans, sweet potatoes, oats, sardines, and cornmeal. They were not humble by accident. They were humble because they were cheap. Yes, but they also happened to be among the most nutritionally complete foods available in any American grocery store, in any price point. Researchers studying the diets of Americans who lived independently into their late 80s and 90s have found patterns that match these lists almost exactly. High fiber, adequate protein, minimal processing. Foods that the body recognizes because humans have been eating them for thousands of years. The retired school teacher in Tennessee who fed herself for 11 days on $3.40 was not surviving, despite her diet. She may have been thriving because of it. Her doctor probably never thought to ask what she was eating. He should have written it down. Number 5. Potato soup with milk and butter. 5 potatoes, whole milk, butter. That is the entire recipe. And before any food blogger in 2026 tries to improve it with roasted garlic and creme fraiche, just stop. It does not need your help. You diced the potatoes and boiled them until soft, then mashed roughly half of them right in the pot with the back of a wooden spoon. Not all of them. Half. The unmashed half gave you something to chew on, and the mashed half thickened the broth into something creamy without a single drop of actual cream. Then the milk went in warm, the butter melted across the top, and the salt got adjusted until it tasted exactly right. 30 minutes. Less than $2. Enough soup to last 3 days in a kitchen. Set for 1. Here is the part nobody talks about. For seniors, in 1975, dental care had not been a financial priority for a generation that survived the Depression and 2 wars. Teeth were a luxury. Soft food was a necessity. Potato soup was not just economical. It was physically possible to eat, which, for a significant portion of the people making it, was not a small thing. It was everything. Number 4. Egg drop soup. Chicken broth from a carton or made from bouillon. 2 eggs, salt and white pepper. You brought the broth to a rolling boil, beat the eggs in a cup with a fork, then poured them in a slow, thin stream while stirring gently. The eggs set instantly into silky golden ribbons that floated through the broth like something a restaurant would charge $12 for total cost. In 1980, under 60 cents, total time, under 5 minutes. For a senior who was sick or tired, or simply not hungry enough to stand at the stove for long, this was the meal that required almost nothing and gave back more warmth and comfort than the effort seemed to deserve. Broth hydrates. Eggs provide protein. The bowl does the rest. Number 3. Canned salmon patties. 1 can of pink salmon. 1 egg. A handful of cracker crumbs or breadcrumbs. You mashed everything together in the can itself to save washing a bowl. That kind of practical genius is something nobody teaches anymore. You formed the mixture into patties and fried them in a dry skillet until both sides were deeply golden and the edges crisped. A can of salmon cost 69 cents in 1979. It made 4 patties. 4 patties fed 1 senior for 2 full meals. The calcium in the soft bones, mashed right in and never noticed, was better for aging bones than most calcium supplements available at the pharmacy. Your grandmother was not being frugal. She was being medically correct, and she had absolutely no idea. Number 2. Crackers and peanut butter. A sleeve of saltines, a jar of peanut butter. That is 2 ingredients, and before you come to the comments to correct me, understand that for the seniors who relied on this most heavily, this was not a snack. This was a meal. Lunch on Tuesday, supper on a night when cooking felt impossible. The peanut butter went on thick with a butter knife, 1 cracker at a time, eaten slowly at the kitchen table, because eating slowly made it feel more like a real meal than eating fast did. Protein, fat, enough calories to get through the afternoon. A jar of peanut butter cost 65 cents in 1976 and lasted a week of lunches. No cooking, no standing, no washing up. For a senior with arthritis or a bad back, or simply a very hard day, those 3 facts were not minor conveniences. They were the whole point. Number 1. Navy bean soup. Dried navy beans, an onion, water, and salt. This is the meal that has been feeding poor Americans since before there was a country to be poor in. You soaked the beans overnight, added the onion, quartered and dropped in whole, covered everything with water, and let it simmer for 2 hours until the beans burst open and dissolved into a thick white broth that tasted far more complex than 3 ingredients had any right to produce. A 2-pound bag of dried navy beans cost $1.29 in 1983 and fed 1 person for an entire week, a week of suppers. The United States Senate cafeteria has served navy bean soup every single day since 1903. That is not a coincidence. It is not tradition for tradition's sake. It is because navy bean soup is cheap, complete, filling, and so good that even senators who could afford anything else kept ordering it. For the senior living alone on a fixed income, bean soup was more than a meal. It was the proof that you could still take care of yourself, that the kitchen still worked, that you still knew what to do when the cupboard was almost bare. 1 bag of beans, 1 onion, water, and the knowledge that the simplest things, chosen well and cooked with patience, are almost always enough. Here is my challenge to you. Make one of these this week. Just 1. The potato soup if your knees are bad and you need something soft. The egg drop soup if you are tired and need something fast. The salmon patties if you want to feel like you actually cooked something real. Then sit down at the table, not the couch. Set a place for yourself. Eat it slowly. Because the seniors who invented these meals were not making do. They were making something. Something warm and real, built from almost nothing, by hands that understood exactly what mattered and exactly what did not. Drop a comment telling which one you are making. I want to know if the bean soup gets the respect it deserves. I want to know if anyone else's grandmother ate savory oatmeal and whether she ever told you why. These are not just recipes. They are proof that 3 ingredients, in the right hands, at the right stove, in a kitchen that has seen real life, can still be an act of quiet, stubborn dignity. My name is Joseph. This is Forgotten Old American. I will see you in the next one.